If you intend on doing any serious offshore sailing, this is the video for you. For context, I'd flown from Toronto all the way to Bermuda to join as crew on a yacht called White Diamond. White Diamond is a 15.1 meter Beneteau cutter rigged. In this video, it was the night before we left on a 1,000 nautical mile passage, all the way from Bermuda down to Antigua. It was the night before, and we were getting ready, talking about Epirbs and MOBs, and I pushed the record button. There is so much to be learned here, so join me and witness a conversation between the crew before we leave on a 1,000 nautical mile open ocean passage. Let's get into the video. So is it okay, the viewers would love to hear me ask a couple questions as you're captain of the boat, and what are some general rules for people that if I'm sleeping, Richard's sleeping, you know, what would you're sleeping and Richard's sleeping, and I'm up on the helm, what are the first general rules?
Okay, so absolutely, in an offshore passage, day or night, is that you never leave the companionway until you are clipped on with a harness. A harness that looks like this and has a clip like this. Okay, so we'll be clipped probably onto a jack line, which is a line specifically intended to clip these on. Some people also have places on the boat that are a strong point for this. But the idea is that you never enter the cockpit. In other words, never leave the companionway until you're clipped on. And these tethers have two of them. So what this does is if you're moving around and you have to unclip from where you're tethered, you clip onto the new tether point before you unclip from the old one. So you're always tethered. Okay.
And obviously, so let's recap that. So you can't even go out in the cockpit without being clipped in alone. And when you're in the cockpit,
in a offshore passage, we will not go into the cockpit at all without being clipped in, day or night, alone or with anybody else.
Right. So that's obviously it just keeps everything safe. It just eliminates a bunch of possible errors. You know,
you get so used to being clipped on that if you're not, it will feel like something's wrong. Right. And I remember the first time coming in from a long offshore passage where we, for 10 days we were clipped in all the time. And you go to do the dock line thing. You're pulling up to the dock, and you realize that maybe it's not a good idea to jump off the boat while you're still tethered.
Yeah, because you end up
get so used to being tethered,
right? Okay.
that it seems odd not to be tethered. Yeah, we're pulling into a harbor, and there's people out there swimming, and we're still tethered to the boat, because we just got in from an offshore passage.
And then I'm assuming there's obviously some basic stuff. No listening to music. Okay. No drinking at all.
No alcohol.
Offshore.
Not only does it impair your judgment, also your vision. So at least that's the rumor. Yeah. So starting the night before, like we're not going to have a drink before we go to bed tonight. Right.
Yeah. And then on the entire passage, we observe these rules until we sight land. We go into land, and then once we're on the hook, everything goes back to normal. But it's got to be a religious thing. I mean, if you're committed to safety out here, guys, that's the only way to be, right? So, I mean, Tom's gone to the effort of purchasing. These are very expensive little devices, okay? But they're life-saving. We hope we're not going to use them. But at the end of the day, you got to have shit like this offshore. I mean, come on, you'd be a fool to go out there without this equipment, right? Using technology.
And for many rallies and races, it's compulsory equipment. And if you're doing a rally or a race, you might check to make sure that you're buying the correct one. Because we had the discussion about PLBs versus AIS, and in fact, first time I went out and I bought PLBs all around, and then found that the rally wanted AISs, which makes more sense because that allows you to be rescued by the vessel that you fell off of, or other vessels for the rally. Whereas the PLB is really only going to be particularly useful when the Coast Guard comes looking for you. Right.
So would they be able to see that signal as well? That's a good question. Is this a common band? So most of our rescue boats, let's say in the United States, in most cases, will have equipment that can obviously see this stuff anyway, which is AIS.
That's right.
So essentially, okay, I'm really cluing in now. So essentially, this is a boat on an AIS chart plotter. And when you arm it, it's got its own distinct signal that sends out, it's line of sight at this point. So that's amazing. So it does not go to a satellite, though. That's the difference between AIS and
Actually,
Eperb. Is that correct?
I'm going to make a precise
4 miles.
4 miles. We know and that's for the AIS beacon. We found it on the internet. It must be true.
Remember that, folks.
Seeds of a solution, so even truer.
Okay.
So 4 miles line of sight, essentially.
4 miles to the antenna on the boat.
Okay.
And I wouldn't be surprised if it
miles.
works better than that, but that's what's the stated.
All right.
Yeah, and the reason I hesitated when you asked about AIS and satellites is there are satellites that will pick up AIS. I suspect that there's not enough power, but I don't know that. So it's primarily meant to be picked up by a nearby vessel. That's the real answer to that question.
Right.
Whereas the PLB, which is like an Eperb, with some minor distinctions, gets picked up by satellites.
Now, as well, we just put the captain made us put our passports in. It's like a very large ditch bag. So just explain to people like who don't really know what that's about on why we did that. Right?
Yeah. So there's a bag that has everything of importance in a situation we're abandoning, and it has things like there's some emergency water, flashlight, a little bit of emergency food, and there a number of things that you might need. Right. And it's actually usually considered to be a supplement to the items that would be in the life raft. Okay. In this case, the life raft I have is the up to 24 hours, I believe, and this extends that, which is why we have extra food and water.
So inside that inflatable life raft that's on deck, the hydrostatic one, you throw
it's not,
into the water.
It's not hydrostatic, but it is the one you pull it to inflate. Yeah.
Has somewhat of a ditch bag already in it.
It's got a certain number of supplies in it.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's got flares. It's got flares and emergency water, but I don't believe it has any food.
Right. Because guys, when you can watch as many sailing videos as you want, all right? But it's gonna dawn on all three of us tomorrow when we're leaving the reef, and you can see Bermuda disappearing. I mean, then you're just out on the ocean, and it's very
600 miles from land.
600 miles from shore. So
maybe it's 500.
I mean, that's I always try to capture that in some of the videos that I post for you guys. And look, man, you have to come out here and do it. So I'm gonna try and bring you guys. I'm gonna tell you how we're all feeling. I'm gonna try and document it. And tomorrow morning, we are leaving to sail 1,000 nautical miles essentially in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, 600 miles from shore, for between 6 and 9 days, arriving in Antigua. So it's crazy. So the safety aspect is huge. We spent the evening here going through a number of things. Our ditch bag. We're now working on our Epirbs and AIS stuff. The captain went through some of the chart plotter with me, some other things. And that's how it's done.
Now here we are hooking up the AIS beacon, which I am struggling with because you don't do this very often. And that has a string that is going to go around. You see, it clips to the inflator tube, and then this ribbon goes around the inflatable part of this inflatable life vest. And when I figure out which knot to use to tie this in, it's a fold and fold back thing, is going to mean that when this inflates, this pulls on this actuator, and that will release the antenna and turn on the electronics for the AIS beacon. And as well, if I were to pull down, or see where it says arm, if I were to pull manually down on that red piece of plastic, that would also inflate it.
Right.
Or not inflate it, arm
the
trigger it. Yeah, right. Trigger the beacon.
So, and then I guess it's designed so that is this plastic piece in the way? Would you have to pick, and then
you pull this one down, and that thing's going to go flying out.
Okay, and then that's how exactly.
Yeah.
Very cool.
And part of installing the ribbon involves pushing this down and putting it out. Not enough to arm, but enough that you can put the little string on. And we didn't have to do that because I've had this on a different life jacket before, so the ribbon was already attached.
Right. What is this? This is the spray hood, right?
So this is the spray hood.
Okay. Yeah. Wow.
Spray hood, and there's a light that goes on when it finds water. There's a little end, and it actually sticks up.
Okay, so just for context, right now we're in St. George's Harbor. The time now is roughly, okay, it is 6:30 in the evening. So we're going to be leaving probably at sunup tomorrow. And we're on the hook right now. On the hook means that we're at anchor. We're not on a mooring ball, which is one of those balls that are floating in the water. Okay. Now, what's the tonnage of this vessel? This is a 52-foot vessel, so I guess it weighs a lot. This is a very heavy vessel. And do you know the
34,000 pounds.
Jesus, 34.
Not to be confused with the tonnage rating. If I were to pull out my paperwork, I would have a thing called a tonnage rating, which is actually, if it was, it's kind of very loosely kind of an indication of how big the vessel is. If you were to,
And that's
how big the interior is measured in tons, which is not the weight of the boat, but the weight of the boat is about 34,000 pounds.
right, and that would be called the registered, I think is what they refer to that as.
No,
the
that's
actual
the displacement.
displacement. Okay.
And the registered net tonnage is, no, that's not mine. Does anybody see my purple bag?
So if we're looking at, so this vessel is a thin keel. Now I believe is it a 6-foot draft? Is this vessel a 6 foot?
Pretty much exactly 6 feet. Yes.
Exactly 6 foot thin keel. All right. Now on a vessel of this size, that's really big. All right. So you took this thing out of the water. It looks like one of those massive yachts you see, and you can see it inside here. Look at this. Look at this. You could put a pool table here. I mean, this is huge. You would obviously not do that, but you get the point, right? I mean, that's the size of this vessel. She's cutter rigged. The mast is 65 feet high. And what is the beam on this now? This is
14 feet 8 inches.
wow, 14. So the beam is the most widest point, the distance between each side of the hull. Really incredible. So fascinating. Originally, this yacht was a charter boat. So they have like this hatch that's forward here, and the hatch that's forward used to keep the cook and the
captain
and the cook, and you would have guests, you know, and they would kind of stay forward.
That's when you hire a captain and a cook for a charter.
Right. So
Okay.
here's some information on the vessel.
Okay, so the reason I was going and looking for this rather than going into my chart table where it would normally be located is that we had just been at Bermuda Customs and Immigration, and I took all my paperwork with me. But the piece of paper that we're looking for, which is going to answer the question about tonnage, here's the official certificate of registration. And my gross tonnage is 27.73 and the net is 26.34. And these are measurements of the boat, measured so many feet, or in this case calculated with meters, although it's probably originally done in feet, that says essentially how large it is, which is, although it's in tons, it's not actually a measurement of weight or mass. And the weight on this boat is, which we call the displacement, because that's the amount of water it's going to push aside when it goes in the water, is 34,000. I think it's about 34,000 pounds. It's probably a little more now.
So
Stuff.
for those who, this certificate of registry right here, I actually came in from the Bahamas without one once, and my vessel was detained for 3 weeks. Okay, and you can watch that video here. Okay, and it's something else. And I was also searched with dogs by the Homeland Security. They came on with guns. Men with guns came on and searched my boat for drugs. They were like, "Michael, where's the drugs?" So check that video out right there. All right, that's pretty interesting. And the certificate of registry is such an important document. You can't go into the U.S. with a pleasure craft operator's card if you're Canadian. Okay, you got to have all these documents. You got to have your radio station license, your MMSI number. There's a lot to look into when you're doing international sailing, right? And you got to have this shit. The Coast Guard boards you. What was your intentions? Let's see your safety equipment. They'll come on board and ask you for all of your safety stuff, right?
And they will be very, very polite and very friendly and very nice people that are a pleasure to have on board your vessel until they're not.
Right, and they're going to be like, by the way, here's your ticket, right?
Which I have not experienced personally, but I've heard stories.
Yeah, so, and I guess in a way that's a good thing, because they're keeping, every vessel essentially has a basic level of safety because of the Coast Guard. And I've had a lot of experience with the Coast Guard, and they've been great. I mean, we were just in New Jersey coming out of one of the ports, and it was scary. I mean, I actually asked the Coast Guard, I'm like, hey, can you guys just kind of follow you out? Because I was fucking scared, man. And I've sailed 10,000 nautical miles. I've gone across the Gulf Stream 8 times. This entrance was scary, all right? And the Coast Guard was there. And sometimes it's better not to be Mr., you know, charge at it, you know, just ask the Coast Guard. Call the Coast Guard and say, hey, man, this entrance looks sketchy to me. And they actually came out and told me about it. They're really good, right? But when it comes to other things, yeah.
Well, when we came into Bermuda,
yeah.
One of the things I was aware of is that I was supposed to call Bermuda radio as I approached, and I was probably just a couple of minutes late from doing that, and I was just picking up the mic, ready to make the call, and Bermuda radio called me by vessel name, which they would have known from the AIS transponder on my boat, and they called me up and said, we see which channel you are in, and we see that you are approaching. And they then discussed the official stuff that we needed to do for me to approach.
Right.
And a big part of what they were doing was confirming that I was approaching safely, which was very, very much appreciated.
Right.
Bermuda radio, and I've really never experienced that. Well, I have in a few places, but you'll make lots of falls without an official radio presence. But here, Bermuda radio does an excellent job of guiding vessels in and making sure everything's legit.
So by Bermuda radio, we're talking about the island of Bermuda, which is 600 miles from shore. I mean, it's like they must have huge antennas that blast are listening all around here as well, right?
Actually, usually VHF range is limited, but the Bermuda radio is actually, it goes out something like, I think, 100 miles. I was on a trip from Norfolk to Antigua, actually Hampton to Antigua, on another vessel as crew, and we were surprised how far away we could hear Bermuda radio. Because we weren't going to Bermuda. We were just sailing, within something like 100 miles away, and we could hear Bermuda radio. So they have a very tall antenna.
Right. So that's how they work it out. Isn't that amazing, guys? I mean, it's incredible. The level that it's a historical thing. The history of maritime. There's a reason why it's called a bank. You know, there's a reason why there's certain names for a thing. It all comes back to the days of when people were at sea. You know, that's why they call it currency. You know, that's why they call it a bank, right? It's like
I didn't know that.
A port. There's a bunch of cool things that you can do research. Anyway, moving on from that. So, what's your plan for tomorrow, as we stand? So, we're excited to. You're going to make a call. Just tell us what this is the captain right here, guys. So he's going to make the decision. How do you make that decision? I mean, talk to us a bit about that. The decision is sort of gradually made and get more certain as things arrive. I'll check to make sure I don't have any last minute emails from from our meteorologist. Right. And I'll do a little bit of last minute checking of the weather. But the thing is, we'll have checked the weather well ahead. Right. A last chance to say, oops, the forecast has suddenly worsened, which could happen, but it probably isn't going to here. Right. And then we'll go, and then on the way out, we will have to do the call to Bermuda. And we've already visited Customs and Immigration today and received our paperwork to leave. Right, and that's essentially when I joined. So my question is if I went ashore right now and the police pulled me over, technically, I'm not in Bermuda right now because I'm on the vessel. Is that correct? I don't know. I had an impression that you could just go to them. Actually, I don't know the answer to that. Yeah, so I'll put that. I think they basically gave us permission to leave and did the paperwork. Right. So. Right. And in some places they call that a zarpe. And they're going to observe the vessel leaving and say, yep, they left and they had permission and we had the paperwork, and that'll all tie together. Right. Because you got to understand, hundreds of yachts come in and out here all the time, right? It's the only place in the center of the Atlantic, right? It's like a dropping off point. That's why the history of Bermuda. I'm going to talk a little bit about the history of Bermuda too in one of these videos. We're going to do a little bit of that as well. So we're all excited. We're all kind of getting our last minute things together. And tomorrow morning, in 3, 2, 1, it's going to be tomorrow morning. You ready? 3, 2, 1. If you found value in this video, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. Let's thank Captain Tom Wood. He is a fountain of information when it comes to sailing. Hit that like button. Let's appreciate Tom's time, and such an honor being on his sailboat and learning from him on how to do this. So on Sunday of next week at 8:45 a.m., we are going to depart Bermuda. So stick around for that video. I hope you found the video interesting and useful and found some value here. It was just such an amazing experience to be on Tom's vessel and to learn how it's done from an actual experienced captain like Tom. So that's it for this video. I know it was a long one. So drop a comment down below. Tell me what you think. And make sure you stick around for next week's video. It's Sunday, where we leave the reef of Bermuda and we head 1,000 nautical miles all the way to Antigua. All right, guys, that's it for this video. Captain Michael signing out.